Public School District to order for Monday, October 11th, 2021. Notice is hereby given that at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, October 11, 2021, the Stevens Point Area Public School District School Board will hold a virtual regular board meeting through the use of WebEx due to district COVID-19 mitigation strategies and other related health and safety factors. Please note that the method in which school board meetings will be conducted, virtual or in person, will be evaluated on a monthly basis in conjunction with district COVID-19 mitigation strategies and other related health and safety factors. We will continue to live stream all our open meetings on YouTube. Upon request to the superintendent's office, submitted 24 hours in advance, the district shall make reasonable accommodation related to accessing this meeting. If accommodations are needed, there is a phone number that people can contact us by, and we have instructions as to how to view our board meetings in progress. So we will move into access to meetings. Due to the public health emergency, the need to limit gatherings, we are continuing to encourage members of the public to attend school board members' meetings remotely. At this point in time, we are holding our school board meetings virtually, as I just noted. So we will have the roll call and verification of quorum.
Mr. Mansky.
Here.
Ms. Va. Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Portson.
Here.
Mr. Wade.
Here.
Ms. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Ebel.
Here.
Ms. Rano.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here, and just to note that that Enva indicated that she might be running a bit early due to conflict, but is planning on being present. So we will make sure we note that when she arrives. So we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are moving into public comments. As noted, in-person public comment is suspended for this month's virtual meeting. However, we will continue accepting comments submitted by email. Those guidelines for emailed comments are present on our public notice and our agenda that goes out on the Thursday prior to our meetings. We received one comment, correct, Carlin?
One comment.
Okay, so I will read that comment. It is submitted by Lori Moyer. With regard to secondary course proposals 2022-2023, I am writing in support of the course revision of, quote, people in literature, quote, to, quote, global literature, quote. It is my understanding that nothing is being eliminated with this course revision. Students will have even more options and the ability to hear more diverse voices. It's been well established that teaching diversity in education has a number of benefits. 1, it better prepares students for a global economy. 2, children with diverse educations are more confident later in life. 3, it promotes empathy and reduces prejudice. 4, it leads to higher average test scores. 5, it fosters creativity. Thank you, Stevens Point School District and Board, for continuing to look at long-term goals for our children and promote diversity education within our classrooms. So that is the one public comment that we received this month. We will move into item 5, our presentations, and for our first presentation, we want to welcome our new student Senate representative from SPASH, Carolyn Blakeman. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Caroline Blakeman, and I'm a junior at SPASH, and I'm the
new Student Senate representative. So, SPASH celebrated homecoming the week of September 20th to the 24th. We had dress-up days the entire week, and the Mr. SPASH competition on Wednesday night. Congratulations to Connor Sievers for becoming the 2021 Mr. SPASH. The week ended with the parade from Washington Elementary to Gerke, where a Pep Fest took place. We celebrated as a school and crowned Emily Bellison as a homecoming queen. Congratulations to everyone on court and everyone who ran for Mr. SPASH. Fall sports are nearing the end of their regular seasons and will soon start their postseason competitions. Congratulations to the SPASH teams on a great fall, including the girls golf team for winning the conference championship. Best of luck in the postseason. It's great to see co-curricular clubs meeting again this year. Most clubs were unable to meet last year, and I'm happy to share that clubs like the Spanish Club, Gamers Alliance, GSA, and the Stevens Point Environmental Action Coalition are up and running. The SPASH Fall Play, A Night of One Acts, is also up and running and will perform on November 5th and 6th. The first two concerts of the year are happening soon. The SPASH choirs will perform on Tuesday, October 19th at 7:30 p.m., and the SPASH Orchestra will perform on Thursday, October 21st. On Wednesday, SPASH juniors will have the opportunity to take the PSAT, which will give them the chance to qualify for National Merit Scholarships. Good luck, juniors. There have been a lot of post-secondary planning programs at SPASH this month, which included College Planning Night, Financial Aid Night, and Senior Planning Meetings. These gave seniors the opportunity to explore different post-high school paths from college to adult apprenticeships to jobs. This concludes the SPASH Student Senate update.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions of Carolyn? Sounds like homecoming was a great success. I was able to be at the parade. It was a beautiful day and it was a huge crowd, so a lot of excitement. So
Yeah, we were really lucky. It was our first homecoming in 2 years, I believe. So everyone was really excited.
Yep. All right, well, thanks for joining us for the year, and we hope you the best for your school year this year, okay? Well,
Thank you.
yep.
Thanks, Carolyn.
All right, we'll move into item B, which is communication report. Sarah O'Donnell.
Hi, thank you. The communication dashboard is included in your packet. Again, you'll note we kind of revised that this year to focus on a little bit more of that social kind of input and output that we're seeing. If we take a peek at that outbound messaging, again, we're tagging and tracking so we can see what we are sending out compared to the highlighted inbound messaging, kind of what we are getting back in to give us a better idea of sort of where folks are when they are choosing to engage in social, specifically the district's Facebook page. Beyond that, no big surprises. Engagement looks good. Across all channels, schools are doing a really great job of continuing to share their stories. So huge kudos to folks that are doing that, making time for that. And then project highlights, I do just want to note, we will be sharing information this month on the required safety drills that we do each year. So we'll be reminding parents and staff of just kind of what those are. So we'll be issuing again that lockout, lockdown, evacuate, shelter, and hold information. It's been a while since we have, it's kind of something we do every year, but not something that has been as top of mind from a communication standpoint, certainly always from a school standpoint. So we'll see that go out with some messaging around just reminding folks kind of what that looks like in the school setting should we need to move in that direction ever. That's it for me, unless we've got questions.
Board members have any questions of Sarah this evening on the dashboard? All right, then we will move into item C, which is the superintendent's report.
Last week was School Board Appreciation Week, and I'd like to again thank you, Meg, as well as all of the board members for your service to our community and specifically to our school district. It's difficult enough to be a school board member in any ordinary year, and of course this is far from ordinary. So I know it's been stressful for some and many. Hang in there, but most importantly, thank you for your service, and know that we certainly respect your work and support you, and I believe that the vast majority of our community does as well. This week is National School Lunch Week. I'd like to also thank our food service workers for creating and serving nutritious meals, morning, lunch, and after school. Again, I don't know how we would have made it through COVID till this point without the staff that we have within our food service. If we have to close our lunch program, for example, we have to close school. So we have been successful doing that, and it's each and every day. And I know it can be challenging at times, and of course we're having a difficulty staffing throughout the school district, as many schools and businesses are, and certainly we're seeing that in our food service department. So they are working harder than they ever had in past years providing those meals. So thank you to all of our food service providers. The ESSER fund update. We really don't have much of an update. We're still waiting to get more details. Again, we'll be receiving approximately $6.2 million in funds for COVID mitigation over the course of 3 years. But quite frankly, because of those ESSER funds, the state of Wisconsin, the legislators didn't put money into the budget, the biennial budget for the next 2 years as it relates to any new monies, dollars, or revenue, whether it be categorical or to the revenue limit. So quite frankly, when those guidelines come out, expect that we're going to have to supplant some of that, if not a lot of that, to get through our regular budget over the next couple of years. But again, we're still waiting to get more details on that. And our school year 2021 update, I'm going to pass it over to Corey to go over our most recent numbers.
So currently we have 21 students that are positive for COVID, 138 students that are currently quarantined, 6 positive staff members, and 2 staff members that are currently quarantined. So our mitigation strategies are doing quite well. Staff are working really, really hard in the buildings to make sure they're following all of our COVID protocols, and we're continuing to manage as best we can.
Our mitigation strategies have been working. I think our numbers back that up. But if we look a little bit more into it, we have not had to cancel school, or we have not had to cancel any classes, much less a school or certainly the district. And of course, we're seeing that across the state, country as well, but I'll just look at Wisconsin. We have been able to keep, as Carolyn had mentioned, all of our events, or many of our events, to include athletic events. And as Carolyn mentioned, some of the arts programs coming back. We are getting, we've been 5 days a week, and we continue to offer our programs and are getting as back to close as we think close can get, knowing that could change at any given time. But we're holding our head above water. We haven't canceled an athletic event. We had one cancellation, I believe, at the junior high, but it was a result of the other team not being able to come because of positive cases within their school. Not that it's been easy. Getting back 5 days a week after we've had a year without has been a challenge for staff as well as students. We're kind of relearning what school is all about. But each day gets better, and we'll keep you posted from board meeting to board meeting, and any updates that would be relevant. That's it for me, unless there are any questions.
Do board members have any questions of Craig? Okay, we will move then into our consent agenda. Our consent agenda includes the minutes of the prior school board meeting of September 13, 2021, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and employment recommendations. I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Scott, second by Judy. Do we have any questions, discussion on that motion? I will have Carlin call the roll due to the monthly bills.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Ms. Rano,
Yes.
Ms. Va, not with us yet, Mr. Mansky,
Yes.
Ms. Erler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So we're moving into the business services, and Mike, do you want to handle that, or would you like me to handle that?
You know, since you're at a central location there, I'd prefer if you did it.
Okay, all right, then we will move into business services. The first item is the financial summary referendum progress report. So we're looking for Tom or Mike.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay. Well, you have the financial summary in front of you. We have it performed in two different table formats to look at it and to cross-check each table against one another. Out of the total referendum budget, then, paid to date is $61.7 million, and contracts issued to date, $72.8 million, with the contract balance being $11.1 million. And you'll notice Table B follows that a little bit more closely. You can find the same numbers in Table A also. We're moving along. We've got the McDill is the current project going on, along with the transportation facility. And after that, we just have Bannock, Bliss, and support services. So it's getting closer to the end. So far, so good. Are there any questions?
do board members have any question on the referendum progress report?
Yeah, I have a question. It's Jeff. Overall, how are we positive or negative against the estimates?
Well, we still have a balance, and that's looking good. Some of the projects were over, of course, and some were under. So
Right.
overall, though, we have a bit of a balance left.
So generally, you're under budget, or at least on budget?
We're close to it, but we're still under.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Tom with respect to the referendum progress report?
Meg, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, once all the work is done, what happens at the very end? Is there anything we need to do once this is all done? Is there any report that's done, or how do you conclude it, or what takes place at the end, if anything?
Well, once all of the projects are completed, then of course you'll get another report like this with a final recap showing where we're at. Originally, we had planned to spend about $2 million beyond what the referendum total shows on this sheet, and we're hoping we won't have to do that. And so far, it's looking pretty good. But there may be some recommendations of something that come along at that point. Normally what happens, we just give you a report of the total, and if there are any funds left, depending on the amount, there may be a project that the board decides they want to do to get done. Notwithstanding that, then the balance would be closed into the debt service to use against paying off the bonds.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions of board members? Okay, thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
We're but I think we're going to be sticking with you because now we're moving into the fund balance presentation.
Yes, the board asked at the previous meeting that we talked a little bit about the fund balance, and so I put this together because you wanted to know there's some questions about basically what is a fund balance, how does cash flow affect the fund balance, and what have been some of the trends of our fund balance, how, what's happened over the years. So if we take a look at the next slide, a fund balance, what is it? This little graph tries to show it in a format that some people can grab a little easier than the words, but fund balance, or sometimes it's referred to as equity, is really the difference between assets and liabilities. So you have on one side of the balance your assets, you have on your other side the liabilities, and then you have to balance it out a little bit more with the equity or the fund balance in order to make the whole thing balance out. On the next slide, then you see some examples of what are assets and liabilities. Assets would include things like cash, investments, prepaids. Those are things that are purchased at the very end of the school year that would only be used for the next school year. So they really are carried over, and that transaction counts towards the next school year. Then you have a thing like receivables. So you have a tax levy may be receivable at the time, and you might have some equalization aid out there, etc. Or there could be money coming from other school districts, and we call those due froms. Then there are liabilities like your payroll, and then there are payroll liabilities like payroll taxes and different things like that. And then, of course, if there is cash flow borrowing, you have interest payments and things like that that have to be repaid, the principal plus the interest. Just as a footnote, physical assets such as buildings, etc., which are fixed assets, do not comprise part of the fund balance. So there really are two types of categories, or groupings, if you will, of fund balance. There's a group that's reserved, and then a group that's called unreserved. On the reserve side, this is something, it involves money or objects or things that can't be appropriated or spent. For example, inventory. You can't spend that necessarily. I mean, it's more of an object. And then you have, sometimes you have a specific legal liability. Maybe money has been donated specifically for a purpose or involves a grant, and the use of those funds must comport to those requirements. And then the unreserved are really funds that can be used for any purpose whatsoever. They're unrestricted. They can be used within that respective fund for which it's balanced. GASB, G-A-S-B, stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and they set the standards for accounting for government entities throughout the country. And the first four types of fund balances on here are the reserved fund balances. You'll find this list in our board policy under fund balance. Oh, excuse me, go back a little bit, I'm sorry. Thank you. Now, some of these things include, like I mentioned, like prepaids or self-insurance or contracts and legal restrictions, or particular formal actions that may have taken place by the board, or restricted donations. And then there's a category called assigned fund balance. We used a number of these in the past, but so if the board wanted to set aside money to build a specific, I don't know, a small addition or something like that, out of some different funds, they could use this fund account. The next item is really it's unassigned. Now, GASB only recognizes the bottom one, 939,900, but the DPI, Department of Public Instruction, provides the ability for us locally to break out the funds in these different categories, what they call revenue stabilization funds, rainy day funds. You set aside money for something that you're planning to do down the road. Working capital, which is cash flow borrowing or where you get your cash flow working capital from. And that particular account is the one where most school districts have money that's in the unassigned area. And then you have contingencies, emergencies, money that you want to set aside. You could be a school district that, because of their geography, maybe deals a lot with flooding or something like that, so they set money aside for emergencies. When you get down to 939,900, if we break these out appropriately, technically anything that's in there hasn't been assigned or apportioned to anything else. So if those were the only monies left there, they probably would be returned through a reduction on a levy, but that's generally how that works. Most school districts don't have that last one, although you'll see that number when it's reported to DPI, because that's the only number of that string that GASB allows, so therefore DPI allows when they report to the public. So that can make it a little confusing. So that's why it's so important for us to explain that that number really is broken out into more things and it's actually used. So fund balance, a lot of people don't understand when we report fund balance. In Wisconsin, public school districts operate on a fiscal year, as all of state government does, that runs from July 1st to June 30th. And fund balances are reported among one another and in comparison to one another based on June 30th fund balance numbers after the audit and all the final adjustments have been made. And it's important to know that fund balance actually changes daily. On the right-hand side of this slide, you see assets minus liabilities equals your fund balance and the change in equity. There'll be another slide where you see something similar to this, and we kind of explain that again. I'll hit that again on another slide. And this is that other slide. So how does a fund balance change? How does it grow? How does it shrink? Well, on the left-hand side, you have your prior year ending balance, which is also your beginning balance. That's your fund balance at the start of the year. And then you have what you add to it is the difference in a given year between your revenue and your expense. We kind of call that the change in equity. So if you bring in more revenue than you have expenditures, you will increase your fund balance or you'll have a positive change in equity. If you wind up in the hole spending more one year than you bring in, you'll have a negative change in equity and that will reduce your fund balance. So that circle on the far right will either get larger or it will shrink depending on what happens on that middle circle, and that's the performance of each year's budget. So that's kind of what happens each year. So the portion of the fund balance that is cash, and not all of fund balance is cash, but the portion that is what we use to pay the bills. That's what that purpose is for. And I'll have some other graphs coming up here to demonstrate that. For example, these are just any 3 years. It doesn't matter which one. This is just an example. This would be, say, numbers. Make up any kind of number you want on the left-hand side there. And what's happening here is this is the net change about the cash that you have. So you'll start out in July and August and September. You bring in a little bit of money there from state aid, and then you get nothing. It just drops, precipitous drop, until you get to the first Monday in December, and then it starts to shoot up again. Now that low point, if you're a district that has an adequate fund balance to avoid cash flow borrowing and therefore taking money out of the budget away from the education process to borrow money, you see that very bottom line there of that graph. There's just a little bit of space between that bottom and that bar. Well, that means you got a little bit of money left, so you got a little bit of a cushion. Now, some districts don't have that. So if you look at the second bar above that, or the immediate bar above that, you can see where that drop off goes below that line. Well, that would be an example where districts would find themselves short of money, and depending what they have to do, either hold bills for a week or so, or borrow short-term, et cetera, they'd have to address that cash flow, because that, most districts, it happens here at that point in December, the end of November, and then again over in March, in June. Now, the cash flow fluctuations, expenditures are fairly consistent throughout the year. You're going to see this coming up on the slide. The salaries, et cetera, take up a large, salaries and benefits take up a good share, along with the purchase services in the budget. And payroll comes out in just about every district. It's either paid in 21 payments a year, 24 or 26, or sometimes a combination of 21 and 24, or 21 and 26, but it's pretty consistent. And then, of course, there are some end of year and start of year payment adjustments that cause that to spike. Revenue, if you look at that table, you're going to see that a good deal of the revenue doesn't come until the last 6 months of the year. So we'll start out in July. There's a little bit of aid that comes in then, and a little bit of tax levy in August. That's the final settlement. We get 15% in September. And if you remember from that previous chart, that's where it kind of went up a little bit, and then it just drops down for the next 2 months or so. So these kind of give you the times when which months these aids come in and in what percents they usually come in. This per pupil aid's a big one, and that doesn't come in for some time. This is the graph I was telling you about. I'm moving my cursor, but you surely don't see that on my computer. Anyway, this blue line with the square boxes, excuse me, shows the disbursements, and they're fairly stable across the way. You get a little spike at the start of school in September. You get another little spike in June when it's coming out, when you have some end of year payments and adjustments and things that are being made. But otherwise, it's pretty stable throughout the year and consistent. Now, when you look at the revenue, you can see that you get some considerable spiking and dropping. So it's quite volatile, and you have several periods there where they don't match up with the expenditures. So that's the purpose of the cash flow, is to smooth that difference out so that there's money available to pay the bills, to pay salaries, to pay for the heat and light, and all the utilities and everything else. I'm often asked, what is a sufficient fund balance? In the next few slides, I'll be talking a little bit more about that, but perhaps the best overall answer is an amount sufficient to avoid short-term borrowing and to realize the long-range goals of the district. Because once cash reserve is spent, it's very difficult to rebuild it, because when it's gone, and it takes a long time to build that back up. So, how do you determine what a sufficient fund balance is? Well, I'm not going to go into detail on all of these. I'll just highlight it. But you've got enrollment patterns that you look at, tax history collection, collection of the history of tax collection. You've got the level of budget support that you get from grants and other programs. How consistently is it there? You have different asset positions about the age of the buildings that are in your district. If everything is relatively brand new, you may not need as much in one particular part of your budget as another. And you have a relationship between cash flow and your cash reserve, because it does obviously cost money to borrow. So if you're going to get into borrowing, you're going to have to pay the people that are going to lend you the money. Then there's also taking a look at your existing debt and figuring out how that fits into your scope of needs, as well as new programs that potentially are coming on the horizon, current and near-term economic development, or your environment development within the community or communities that make up your district, and the economic environment that's surrounding you. And again, the overall bond rating and your future debt. If you're looking at having debt coming up in the reasonably near future, it's important for you to have a solid fund balance to help affect that rating. And that's something you can't do in a short term. It takes a while to build that up. So when it comes to the basics for board members, there's a list here. You flip to the next slide. One of the things to remember is that fund balance is not equal to cash. It is not cash. Cash is part of fund balance, but it's just that. It's just part of fund balance. It is not all of fund balance. And it changes daily. It's reported on the 30th of June each year and compared on that basis among districts and to ourselves in terms of a timeline. The Fund 10 balance is what's used in reference when we do these comparisons, and fund and cash balance need do differ by the district because like that list I showed you before, some amounts may seem high in some cases, but it may not even meet the cash flow needs of a particular district. So you really have to analyze it district by district. That's why it's so difficult. You can't pick out a magical percent or dollar amount and say that's what you need for fund balance. You might be able to frame it into some wider parameters, but you do need to be careful with trying to put too much emphasis on a particular number. Spending of the fund balance, that can be appropriate for one-time things or special needs or something like that. It is not appropriate to use fund balance to meet ongoing operational expenses. That would basically be akin to trying to meet your regular daily household budgets by using your savings account, and of course that would deplete that, and then you'd have nothing. So that'd be a pretty bad move. So fund balance policy, which every district in Wisconsin is supposed to have, and we of course have one. Those should be somewhat unique to each district, or certainly they should set up parameters that when you evaluate the need for your fund balance and what's an appropriate amount, your resulting discovery would vary by district. And in conclusion, then, this is the information on our district and over time. And you can see in the last several years, our fund balance has remained dollar-wise pretty consistent. The line in yellow or gold that is dropping, that's because our percent of fund balance is declining and has been for several years. We try to maintain about the same amount of fund balance. Like I said, it's hard to build up fund balances, but if we can hold as much steady as we can to protect ourselves and meet our cash flow needs, that helps. That helps. Of course, our fund, general fund, etc., increases each year with salaries and benefits and other costs that go up, heat, light, electricity, etc. So as a result, our budget gets smaller. If we hold our fund balance about the same, then of course our percents are going to drop. So we're down around 27%, etc. And if you look at the first year, it's a little dark here, but we're only about 4% higher than we were as a percent of our fund balance than we were in 2011. So that's kind of where we're at. We're doing okay with respect to that. And I guess I would take any of your questions if you're still awake.
Great presentation, Tom.
I mean, it's not exactly riveting, but
Well, Tom, I had a question. I was enthralled by your whole presentation, first of all. But I had a question. You mentioned a fund balance policy.
yes.
Forgive me, but I've never heard one stated. I'm sure there is one. Could you put that into words?
It's a somewhat lengthy policy. It does contain, let me see if I can, it's under school board, under policies on the website. I'm clicking on it now on my computer trying to get it to come up. Here we go. Under finances, I think, let me see. Of course, we have a lot of board policies. I didn't remember the number off the top of my head, so.
But it's on our homepage?
Yes, it's under, under school board, under board policies.
Okay. Well, I'll look it up. You don't have to spend time,
Yeah,
looking it up here.
okay,
I had one other question though.
sure.
Have we ever had to borrow to meet, at any time, to meet expenses, daily expenses?
We were borrowing up until about 2010. That's when I came, and at that point, the fund balance did get to the point where we no longer needed the short-term borrow, and we were able, since that point, to continue to improve enough with our fund balance and our situation that we haven't needed to borrow since then.
Okay, thank you.
We came real close once.
Do any other board members have questions for Tom about fund balance in the present?
I just have a quick follow-up to G's question. So if we needed to short-term borrow, we have a relationship with someone now that would loan us short-term?
Sure.
Okay. That's it.
Do any other board members have questions? Tom, I guess my only question, clearly, we as a district have had to go out and do some significant borrowing over the last, years with respect to our referendum. Can you speak a little bit to where our rating was and how that impacted our ability to borrow those dollars, and what that meant for our taxpayers?
Well, we, on our 2018 issue, I think it was 2018, we were upgraded to is A plus, a double, I think it was I hate to say because I'm probably going to be wrong. It was an A plus, I think, or I think it was an A plus. And then when we went for our other borrowing, the industry was pretty tough at that time. A lot of them were being downgraded, etc. But we were able to hold on to our rating. If I could look it up and get back to you with what they actually, I think it was an A plus. I hesitate to say double A, because double A plus, I'm just not positive. But we were able to maintain our higher rating. It's a very good rating that we have. Not the highest, but I mean, very good.
And so for me, kind of as a novice, what is that, what is the benefit to the district when we go out for borrowing if we have an A plus rating
Preferred rates.
versus a B rating?
Yeah, I don't want to oversell this. I mean, it's important. It's not the only factor that enters into it when they do an evaluation of a district and they look to determine its rating. There are many things in terms of stability of the leadership, the district, what the supporting communities around it look like. I mean, it's just a number of factors. One factor, which isn't a very important one, is the stability of the district. I mean, have they been able to meet their bills? Do they have unscheduled or unplanned losses in their budget? Have they had deficits that were not expected or planned for? Or, and if they did, how do they know about it, or how do they handle it, or what's been their course of action? How are they able to keep their budgets and their performance, meeting their responsibilities stable over time? So there's just a myriad of factors that enter into it. And of course, obviously, fund balance is one. If you have a strong enough fund balance that you are not having to dip into your budget to borrow money, that's a positive thing.
All right. So, any other board members with questions? All right. Thanks, Tom. Now we're going to probably stay with you or Mike and move into the review of the 2020-21 general fund budget performance.
Yeah, you can stay with me if you can take it. Well, I put this together so kind of tell you a little story about what happened last year. I mean, it was a crazy year for everybody. And, I've always said that, when you put together a budget, the only thing you can be sure of is that it's wrong, because there are so many things that happen throughout a school year, so many variables that you get hit with, and COVID, of course, really gave us a whole bunch of them. So we started out with a revenue budget of $91.5 million in the general fund, and we wound up with actual revenue of 90.7. So from a budget standpoint, we're about 800,000 under budget. Now, that's not necessarily alarming, because you have to look at the other side of the coin. What happened with expenditures? Well, we were budgeting 92.6 million because we know we have a structural deficit that we have to deal with in time. But right now we're trying to get through all of this COVID stuff. But our expenditures came in at 90 million. So we were actually 2.5 million under expenditures. So if we were under in revenue, but even under more in expenditures, we wound up with under budget by 1.7 million. So that was very helpful. If you slide that down a little bit, Corey, you'll see that there's the 1.7 million. So then to help explain this story to you, I wanted to reconcile that 1.7 million, and that's what that list is below there, to kind of say, well, what things happened. So first of all, in revenue, we had things like, well, we had a transfer from the ESSER funds for indirect costs. This would be costs of running the programs, et cetera, administratively, that the project allows us to charge. Our admissions from revenue, of course, were down significantly because there were very few contests, athletic contests and plays and things like that throughout the course of the year, so that was down. Interest income, as everybody knows, is not very good, and that dropped precipitously from the previous years where interest was at least a little bit better. Gifts and student fees and other local revenues were also likewise down considerably because of the lack of activities that we had in the past school year. Then there are some various state and aids and federal aids that were down a little bit that were a result of the project inactivity. That would have gone along with a reduction, a corresponding reduction in expenditures. Our open enrollment aid was a little bit higher than we had expected because there was a little bit more activity last year. I'll be talking about that coming up. Now we get into the expenditure side. Salaries actually and benefits were a little higher than we had budgeted, and we wound up because there were a lot of things that we had to do to for COVID that we would not have normally had to do, but that's the case on that. And personnel and property services came considerably under because there weren't things that were happening. Utilities and travel, those were down considerably under budget because some of the buildings, they just weren't utilized, they weren't heated as much, they weren't lighted as much. There weren't people in them for some days. Travel was down because there weren't athletic contests, there weren't field trips, there wasn't, in some cases, there wasn't much travel. So that and communication in terms of telephones and other types of activity. We had some payment to non-government entities, intergovernmental payments. That was a little over budget that was related to this. And then, of course, you had supplies, which was down considerably because of the fact that we didn't have a lot of the activity in the buildings and classes, et cetera, in place. Non-capital equipment, as well as other non-capital objects, same story, as well as capital objects. Other accounts is just a collection of a whole bunch of little accounts from all the thousands of accounts we have that kind of balance things out. Then we had the transfer to the general fund. We actually wound up transferring 2.8 million less to the 27 fund than we needed, due in part to some of the COVID activity and COVID funds. And then we took $2 million and moved it to Fund 46. What this allows us to do is claim state aid. We get roughly about half of that in state aid next year, which will help us reduce the levy and sets funds aside for future plannings in the projects. And then, of course, there's the board direction that we take the fees paid for the parking lot to set those aside each year of the 46 funds, so that's what was done. So there's the 1.7 million, and that's how we got to where we're at. I don't know, I hope you don't ask me any really detailed question about some of these accounts, because there's an awful lot of accounts out there and a lot of activity that took place to get there, but that's kind of a summary of it. So do you have any questions?
Oh, go ahead.
Tom, I had a question. Where are the ESSER funds included in our actual budget this year? Have we received them, or are we going to, or what's up?
The numbers you saw included ESSER 2 funds. It may have included some residual from ESSER 1 as well, but ESSER 2. It does not contain ESSER 3, because what you looked at was last year's budget.
What is ESSER 3? Is that the 6.2 million that Craig was alluding to earlier?
Yes, that's ESSER 3. That is on this new budget coming up that we'll be addressing in a couple of weeks. Please be advised that the 6.2 is covering multiple years. It's going to cover both years of the biennial budget, so it'll only be half in 1 year and half next year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did someone else have a question as well?
I did, Mag, but I just found the answer, so thank you.
Okay. Do any other board members have any questions for Tom about this general fund budget performance? This is something we do, again, this is really our annual event. This is the meeting before our budget hearing, which of course we have our special meeting at the end of this month. I believe it's October 25th. And so at this meeting, we try to give, board members a sense of, okay, here's what happened with last year's budget. The reality is we started this year's budget, or we've been working off of this year's budget since July 1. And it's just the way the system works in Wisconsin. We aren't approving our budget until we're July, August, September, October. We're 4 months into our budget, the present budget at the time we are approving it, due to state aid calculations, due to equalized value calculations, due to voucher calculations, how many students are enrolling into Catholic schools, or private charter schools, and how it impacts that. But those numbers don't get to us until, I believe, Tom, the last numbers we get are going to be about a week from now. And so then Tom and Finance have that final week really prior to that budget meeting to be able to pull all those numbers together that let us know how we're going to be moving forward with our budget for this year. All right, hearing no questions, then we'll move into item D, which is our third Friday enrollment count.
Okay, I think the best thing to do is just take a look at the second page of this memo. If you notice there on the yellow, this is the third Friday membership count. This is a summary table. It shows 3 columns here on the yellow. You have a thing called students in seats. We call that seat count. Imagine that. And then we also have a resident membership and a membership FTE. And I'll explain this. This third Friday, which was September 17th, 2021, sitting in seats were 6,967 students. So that when we say in seats, they were either there on that date or they were there a day or so or a week or so prior to that, and then they have subsequently returned to school. So they might have been ill, for example, and they weren't there on that Friday. There might have been a trip or whatever. But this is a count, this is a seat count. That tells us how many students are in front of our teachers and who we're educating in this district. And the resident membership, which is 7,236, this is a count of the students who are our residents. Now, going back to seat count, some of those students in the 6,967 count, some of them are not our students. In fact, 188 of them aren't. But when we get to the membership column, that's all of the students who reside within our district. And some of those go out of our district. They go somewhere else to get their education. And the third column, which is membership FTE, 7,017, that number's lower because that's full-time equivalency. So within this membership number of 7,236 reside some students who do not attend full-time. They have a value less. They might be a four-year-old kindergarten, or there might be students who are attending less than full-time. And so that translates into 7,017 students. And that number is a number that shows up, for example, on our revenue limit for our 3-year rolling average. And DPI uses that number along with the one in January for state aid calculations, etc. Now, moving to the right in the bluer area, you have our open enrollment tuition waivers, 6603's intergovernmental agreements, which we didn't have any this year anyway. But so we have more students coming in than we've ever had before, 188. But we also have more students going out, 462. You do a ratio of dividing this one number by the other, and it still maintains about a 2.5 ratio. We had 2 years where it spiked. That was in 2017 and 2014, where we had many more students going out than coming in terms of a ratio. And you can see that if you scroll down, you can see the membership count table, graph rather, that shows that even though the blue line is the in-seat arrangement, the gray line in the middle is the membership, and then the resident membership is up here. This is the FTE in here. So as you go down and look at the next ones, these are the open enrollments, and you can see the area here, the bar graph on the right. You see the 2 spikes sticking up. Those are those 2 years that I was telling you about. 14 and 17. And then you can see on the left, that graph is good. It shows you a trend line, and you can see that both are upward, and the gap is remaining somewhat close in terms of the proportion. So we're still holding about a 2.5. I think the average is 2.6 as a ratio, and we're at 2.5. But that's kind of how it's going on the fact of the open enrollment. So I guess I'd entertain any questions that you might have.
Do board members have any questions related to the third Friday enrollment count or the charts, graphs presented?
Yeah, I have a question. If a student goes to a local private school, or they wouldn't be a student in a seat, but are they part of the resident membership count?
If a student does not go to another public school, then we lose count altogether.
Okay. So any student going to a private school, they're not listed anywhere on here.
Correct.
What about summer school participants? Don't we get some credit for them, and does that show up on here?
We do, and it shows up on the revenue limit worksheet, which I'll be covering with you in 2 weeks. That's where we pick up those counts. We did a much better job this year in summer school. We recovered quite a few. We're not. I think we went from some terrible number like. I hate doing this off the top of my head, like 18 or 20 kids back up to 75, but we were around 120 something, 124, 7, something like that. So we're not back to pre-COVID numbers from last summer school, but the folks in summer school did a heck of a job, and our participation went way up. So that did help us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do any other board members have any questions for Tom related to the third Friday enrollment count? Okay, thank you, Tom. We'll now move into item E, which is the review of the financial statements.
Hi, everybody. The financial statements that are in your packet are through August 31st. We are currently closing out September, so that's why we're always looking back, and we're a good month. There's really two parts to those statements. One part is the balance sheet and balance sheet highlights. The other part is the revenue expense reports, and then highlights of those. Listening to Tom's presentation, because he gave quite a few tonight, a lot of the information that he was talking about can be found in these reports. So for example, if you want to see where we are in terms of expenses compared to where we were last year in terms of budget, that's in the revenue expense highlights. If you're looking at revenues, Tom talked about that we receive revenue kind of sporadically throughout the year. You'll see that our tax revenue so far this fiscal year and our state revenue so far this fiscal year is at 0. We haven't received any yet. We did receive a little bit of revenue, but that was for the previous fiscal year in July and August. And so that's not recorded on these reports. In September, when I give that report, you will see our first state revenue. That'll come through at that time. If you want to look at fund balance to see, well, what is the fund balance right now? That's going to be on the balance sheet and the balance sheet highlights. So every month I'll state what the fund balance is for Fund 10. Right now, it's currently at about 17.7 million. So those can be found on those reports. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on where you can find some of that information on a month-to-month basis that Tom talked about. Do you have any questions for me regarding those financial statements?
Do board members have any questions regarding the financial statements this evening? Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We will now move into item 8, human resources, recruitment and retention.
Yes, good evening. As most of you probably have heard by now, we have been struggling to fill some of our classified positions. Those classified positions consist of our special ed EAs and EAs, food service workers, bus drivers, and some of the other hourly folks. We realize this is a community-wide problem as well as a national problem, but we do have double the number of openings this year as compared to last year. If you look at the board memo that was published last week, we're at 120 vacancies, 119, sorry, 60 last year. So it's pretty significant. Our turnover rate for our teachers has stayed relatively low. We're at 7% for teachers, and our overall turnover rate is at 12%. But for our EAs and our food service workers, we're looking at 20 and 23% respectively. So it's a large number. So we've increased our advertising efforts, have participated in the local job fair, but we decided we better take a look at our pay rates to make sure that we were competitive with our comparable school districts. And we did find that we are paying under the market for our food service staff as well as our special ed EAs. So tonight we're asking for permission to bring those rates up to the market rate, the comparable market rate with our neighboring districts. That's going to run about $59,600 for our food service staff, and then $53,100 for our special educational assistants. So we're hoping if you approve this tonight that we'll have at least 100 applicants knocking at our door tomorrow morning.
Do board members have any questions of Beth with respect to the present?
Beth, I have a question, and I want to make sure you understand that I'm asking a question. I'm not questioning. Do you believe that the amount you're asking for, which to me, and again, I haven't looked at the whole picture of what that actually means, do you think that those amounts are enough to really increase the numbers that we need in applicants versus what we're currently getting? I mean, they don't seem very high, but I'm not multiplying them by the hours and that. So just,
I hear what you're saying. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know that the supply is there for us. I think most folks in these positions want to stick around the Stevens Point area versus going, to a Wausau or a Wisconsin Rapids. But we at least have to be competitive and be at that market rate. And especially just even retaining the employees that we have. We don't want to see them go to Target or McDonald's. And I know some of those organizations are offering different incentives, but I think at least we have to start here.
okay, thank you.
Beth,
Yeah.
by market rate, is that the average of districts around us? I mean, how did you determine that?
Yes, that would be accurate.
Okay.
Are there any other questions of Beth? Then I would be looking for a motion to approve wage adjustments for the food service staff and special educational assistant compensation plans to the market rate is presented.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
So that was a motion by Wade, and was that a second by Judy?
Judy.
Okay, all right. Any discussion or questions on the motion? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. Thank you. So we are moving into item 9, which is educational services. And Rob, you're the chair. Would you like to run this part of the meeting, or would you like me to continue?
You're doing such a great job. Be happy for you to continue. I don't want to ruin your momentum. So
Okay.
please feel free.
I think it's easier just because I'm here in the building. I know it's being on remote Zoom meetings, it's kind of hard to be able to see everybody even on your screen and keep track. So at least we've got everybody here on screen, which I think is kind of helpful. So I'll move into item A, which is our secondary course proposals for 2022-2023.
Good evening, everyone. Each fall, as you're aware, we bring secondary course proposals to the board. The process is extensive. These proposals typically come from our teachers. They go to their principals or Brigida, our CTE coordinator. They come then through the Ed Services offices and then to the board for final approval. Though those proposals can be simply a course name change, which would be a course where the teacher believes a new name more accurately reflects the curriculum and activities of the course. It might be a course revision where curriculum is changed, or it might be a course alignment, which a great example of that is what Brigida has brought forward, where courses are kind of made into semester courses and aligned vertically, so they create kind of a career pathway, if you will. I'm really happy that Brigida and John Vollendorf are both here tonight to answer any specific questions that you have. In the way of ag, there are several course name changes, some revision, and a new course that Brigida can talk about in a minute. I thought we would focus specifically on a little bit more discussion of our new courses tonight. So Brigida, would you like to talk about a little bit of the alignment work that you did and then the new course that you're suggesting? Oh, did we lose her?
She's muted.
We see her, she's muted, and we can't see her. We just lost her.
Okay, we'll come back to ag and hopefully Brigida's back on.
Okay.
In the area of English and drama, global literature is a course that was called People in Literature. The English staff spent some time expanding that course to be more global and to include more authors around the world, very similar to a course that we had in the past called World Lit. And so that was a proposal from our English department. Next was a new course, but certainly not new activities, is our stage crew. And I think, John, if you're on board.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. And first of all, thank you to all the teachers who put time into this. As someone who's been a part of this process now for a really long time, like Connie said, this is something we really care about, and we're really proud of being able to stand up and say that our high school course offerings includes over 285 different classes. So the stage crew proposal for you is something that we've been talking about for a long time, and I'm really an advocate of. Our stage crew is an integral part of our school. They're behind the scenes of virtually everything that goes on in our auditorium, whether it's a guest speaker in August to serve as part of our PD for new teachers, for our concerts, for our plays, for our musicals. And that has been always just our students and an advisor, and they meet regularly after school to do upkeep on things like our lights and our soundboards. They help with the assistance of creating sets. And a couple years ago, we kind of just stood around one day and said, you know what can we do to make this better? And that response was, without question, let's find a way to give our students who choose to participate in the stage crew the opportunity to earn an elective credit for doing so. They spend, again, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. So stage crew, should a student choose to enroll in that as a curricular offering, will be a non-graded, pass-fail participation credit that will look great on the student's transcript, especially if they're going into something in design or performance moving forward. Dina Mercer is the advisor for that, and she has had for the past several years, as our stage crew has evolved, a very established set of expectations. So students will have a certain number of hours and things that they'll have to get there, but this will give our students who participate in that not only a validation of that experience, but also recognition of it on their transcript.
Next course is within the physical education course, and this is kind of an interesting proposal because it comes from a kind of a direct result of situation that we had with summer school. Forever, we've had a summer swim program that I would argue is second to none in terms of the number of kids that participate in swimming lessons at a very, very, very low cost through our summer school program. This year, we unfortunately had to cancel some sessions because of a shortage of lifeguards. And that was throughout the state and certainly in our community in other places that are offering swim lessons to young people. So kudos to our physical education teachers. I suggested that we think about, could we possibly offer this course during the school day as a physical education course that students could get done during their school day for credit, and as a result of successful completion of that class, these students could have kind of a guaranteed position in our summer school program as a lifeguard. We've had already one of our instructors step up and spend a couple weekends getting certified. So we have things in place. We are hoping that the board would approve this as a new course. So that we can not only get students that opportunity to learn, it's not just water safety and lifeguarding, but CPR and other safety measures, get them physical education credit, help our summer swim program, and help them for summer employment if they would choose. Not all students may take the course for summer employment, but certainly we could be doing some really good marketing and get lifeguards, so we wouldn't have to cancel sessions in the summer. And so that course would be a new course within physical education for an elective credit. And then finally, well, John, we want to talk about the world languages. That was a proposal from our ESL, Secondary Instructional Leader and Marchant. It's actually been a course that has been offered in summer school in a shortened version for our younger students. It was extremely popular. And so, John, you want to talk a little bit more about the work that Ann has done?
Yeah. First of all, our district is incredibly lucky to have Ann Marchant helping lead our ELL programming and support. Ann's a national board certified teacher, and she's very active on the state level with English language learners. So this proposal comes directly from Ann and our ESL team, and the whole purpose of it is to give our students more of an opportunity to move forward with their literacy, specifically in their first language, which we know also will help their literacy in English. So this is a course trend that is very current. There's programs currently in Eau Claire, Sun Prairie, and Madison. The UW person and professor who has also helped kind of kickstart this is at UW Whitewater, and Onalaska, Wausau, and Appleton are also considering similar programming. So again, this Hmong Heritage Language class would give our students with some one language proficiency, the opportunity to further develop not just that, but also to improve literacy in both their first and second languages.
And finally, I'll see if Brigitte was able to get back on.
Hi everyone, sorry my internet keeps going in and out for
Oh, shoot.
just briefly to talk to you about some of the agri-science we have at the junior high level in grades 8 and 9. Prior to the approval of this, our 8th and 9th grade offerings were agri-science as a year-long course or a semester course, which was confusing to parents, students, and the teachers. So we broke those classes up into 2 semesters, Intro to Agri-Science 1 and Intro to Agri-Science 2, which makes a lot more sense sequentially in everyone's brains. And then we also added on an Introduction to Animal Science course as an elective for 8th and 9th grade students as well as a semester course, just to give them more options. We do have a growing number of students who are interested in taking those courses at the junior high level. You can see the trends in your packet of students enrolling in those courses and just providing them another option. FFA, as most of you know, is one of our strongest career and technical student organizations with close to almost 80 members in our district. So that's a change there. And then we also changed at the senior high level. We had 2 separate courses, Field and Game and Fisheries, which were offered as 2 single semester courses. We're combining them into one to align with the dual credit course that is offered through Mid-State Technical College, which only makes sense because right now they'd have to take both of those courses separately in order to earn the 3 credit within the same school year, which is very difficult. So we're combining those 2 courses at SPASH into one course that aligns for the dual credit at Mid-State. Any questions?
Are there any questions of board members, either to Brigitte, John, or Connie with respect to the proposals in front of us by board members? Go ahead, G.
Go ahead. All right, I had a question about the Fish, Forest, and Wildlife Management course. Do we still have a conservation course taught in the science department?
Not that I'm aware of, G. I think we just have the WRA course.
Okay.
That's offered.
All right, and then
That's a combination of the 3.
yeah, I know what that's about. We used to have a conservation course, but if we don't have one anymore, then this must have satisfied that curriculum. Then I had a question about the stage crew course. Is there any problem with that being outside this regular school day for offering credit?
Good question. This would mirror some of the other things that students can do to earn credit, not necessarily during the day, whether it's something like work experience, which is a program we've had forever. And again, that kind of led to that suggestion that, well, geez, we're giving some students, whether it's in an apprenticeship or a work experience, the opportunity to earn that credit. We should do the same with our crew. So no, that's not an issue.
Yeah, it won't be an issue with DPI or anything like that?
No, because it's an elective course.
Okay.
It'll go on the transcript as an elective credit.
Okay. Thank you.
Anne, I believe you raised your hand.
Yeah, so just a couple of things on the Hmong language course. I love that it is being proposed and it is being brought to us for conversation. I do have a couple questions on it, and it's ironic. I had a long 2-hour conversation with a friend of mine regarding the language and the dialects. So I'm not sure how many of you all are aware, and I apologize, I'm keeping my camera off just because of Wi-Fi and where I'm located. Otherwise, I cut in and out. But there are 2 dialects for the Hmong language. So what concerns me is that are we going to hire someone or looking for someone who has the primary, so there's a white the white dialect and the green dialect. And the difference is kind of like American English and British English, where the terminology is very similar. However, there are words that can mean completely different things. So one word I like to use as an example is the word blanket. The word blanket in the white dialect, many folks will know that it is a blanket. However, if it's a Hmong person speaking the white dialect, to a Hmong person who knows the green dialect, they will hear this word and they will think that it's something completely different. So my concern is, even though the Stevens Point area is primarily the white dialects, we do still have some plans that do speak the green dialect. So there may be some confusions there. I saw one of the comments saying that the daughter wanted to have a conversation with her father. However, the mother had to always be present so that she could kind of like do interpreting translations for the father. So we want to make sure that we keep that in mind when we are looking for someone who meets the criteria. Another thing is that we also need to be looking for someone who has a cultural understanding of Hmong history. We also have to understand that a lot of the Hmong history and language was not written until mid-1900s, so 1950s, 1960s. I believe there was two different, I know that the French came in and had helped out with the Hmong white dialect. And then there was another group that came in and helped with the green dialect. And so it is going to be different. So when we're talking about spelling-wise, there may be some confusions. So we really need to keep that in mind, that we do have different dialects here. And then for the fact that it is also looking to teach culture and history, that we need, I know that, again, it's hard because we don't have, say like a world history book on Hmong folks and Hmong history and culture. So I think a lot of it's going to be a collection of trusted resources and trusted authors who have had a lot of insight with not just Hmong in the U.S., but Hmong all over. Hmong folks they are from all over the world. We started from China and then immigrated down Southeast Asia. And so we also have to see that, again, I learned this today, where more in the Southeastern Asia, we identify ourselves with the dialects. But then when you get more northern Laos and more northern Vietnam and into China, they don't have that differentiation between dialects. And if you listen to those folks talk, you know that they all have the same dialects. But there is history as to why there are two different dialects. And it's what I found out was it's actually because of persecution. And so Hmong folks with the white dialect had we changed our dialect so that we could say, well, we're not the enemy. We're not these folks who you have known to be helping other folks out. And so we, to get away from harm and violence, we changed up our dialects so that we would sound more like folks around us. And so having that also understanding of why it is what it is and why it looks like it is important. So even though it sounds like this could just be a language course, I think there's a lot more to our history of our language, and understanding where the written language came from, because we are more of an oral language. Again, the written language didn't come into the mid-1900s. So keep that in mind when we are looking for that person who is going to be coming into this position, and know that this is going to be a position that will need a lot of support. Again, just because we don't have many things out there, again, books or things like that, they will have to do a lot of research on their own.
And thank you for bringing those issues up. The first issue to which you spoke, which is that responsibility of finding, recruiting, and getting a teacher in place. That's one of the things that Ann and I have talked at length about, especially as we reached out to some of these places that have started this and are trying to start this. So your point is well taken about the dialect issue and the awareness of that. The people who have successfully implemented programs like this have worked really hard to find someone that can can do the best they can given that situation like you described. And that's our goal as well, is to find someone who not only speaks the language well enough to teach that piece of it, but also the heritage component of it, because as you said, this is not simply a language class. We're really looking to provide that experience for our students that will serve both of those purposes. And the resources piece is one that Connie and I have talked about as well, and we know that we're going to have to do whatever we can to support them as we start this.
Yeah, definitely. I know that locally we have lots of great resources. We've got folks who have been working on something similar to this for years. So, you know, when the time comes, I would be more than happy to get you all connected to these folks. Again, I just think it's funny because this is a conversation that I had today with someone from Wisconsin Rapids, and just having like that brief history lesson, it really goes a long way. And I do also just want to bring something up. So when I talk about the two dialects, you'll see that when we write the word Hmong, we capitalize the H and the M, because that is to show that we are taking into consideration of the green dialects and the white dialects. And so we're including, it's an inclusion thing when we are writing this out. So if you notice that when I write letters or emails, if that is there, that's the explanation, is to make sure that folks are included in this.
Do you have any further questions, Ann?
No.
Okay, yes. Go ahead, is that Chris? Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to let you know, so every year when we get the new offerings, I'm always really excited about them. They always sound wonderful. I know there's a lot of thought and work that go into them. Very excited about the new offerings. Love the stage, love the world language. I'm wondering if in some of the courses you put how much credit, or if it's a half a year or a full year, that would be helpful to know on the elective courses and that. I'm not sure, is this like the world language, is that a year-long class? And the
every course, Chris, is a semester-long half.
They're all semester?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
With the exception of the physical, of the life responders.
Right.
That one's going to be every other day, second semester, which equates to a quarter credit.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure on that one either. Okay. Well, thank you. They just look like wonderful courses. Thank you very much. And thanks for explaining. Someone had asked, why are some of the classes offered? What does it mean when you're the revisions or alignment? And Connie, you explained it at the beginning, so I appreciate it because the question was out there, and appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Judy, do you have a question? Oh, that was Judy. Okay, Judy, there's a hand in front of you, but I think it was the hand that Ann put up earlier.
No, it's a new one, I think.
Okay, so does someone have a question, I guess?
I do.
Go ahead, Ann, sorry.
Her comment, and it would the language course, would that be counted towards a foreign language class?
Correct. World language curriculum, and so it'll go under world languages on a transcript.
World language, okay.
Do board members have any further questions related to what has been presented to us? I guess I want to just put my, I'm grateful for the global literature for course revision. We have continued as a district. I know the board has been uniformly supportive of broadening EDI, broadening global education, and I really appreciate, as we're looking at what we currently have, how we can make those improvements. So I appreciate that. I also wish that we could get that life responders course going this year, but anyway, hopefully we'll have some creative planning about how we can encourage our students to maybe work towards that lifeguarding so that we've got more opportunities this next summer for families. But All right, so I guess I'm looking for a motion to recommend approval of the new secondary courses, course revisions, and course name changes.
So moved.
Okay, that was a motion by, who was made the motion?
Mansky.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Rob Mansky and then second by Mike Wade. Are there any discussions or questions on the motion? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? The motion carries. Thank you. We'll move into item 10, Student Services. A, the annual seclusion and restraint report.
Good evening, board members. This evening I'm in front of you with our annual seclusion and restraint report. A little background that this year you'll see a little bit of an update that in 2009 Wisconsin Act 118 was revised under the seclusion and restraint and went into effect March 4th of 2020. What that required was a new way of reporting seclusion and restraints. And so you'll see in the board memo that we now not only provide you a district view of how many incidents of seclusions that we do, both for regular ed students and those with disabilities, but we also report out the number of students in each of those, as well as for our restraint totals. New this year, as you'll see in one of your attachments, we also report out each of our individual schools in our LEA. And so you'll see that attachment as well. And this will give a background on what an incident means, also what a seclusion or a restraint means, and some definitions of what is required if students are secluded as well. And those are reviewed every year. We also increased our trainers this year as well, so every one of our buildings has an assigned trainer or two, depending upon the size, to ensure that those staff members who need to provide this intervention to students are fully trained for the instances that occur. Also included in your board packet is also a 5-year comparison that you'll be able to see as we go back 5 years as to see our numbers. You'll see a downward trend. I think some of that can be attested to COVID over the past few years, but also we've done a tremendous work in positive interventions and strategies, as well as programming for students with disabilities, as well as just general like behavior management and strategies under social work. And then this report will also be sent to DPI, exactly what you see presented as well, and that's by December 1st every year.
Do board members have any questions of Caleb with respect to the report?
Caleb, good to see those numbers have really dropped. Really appreciate that 5-year look. That's amazing in almost every category there. So kudos to all of the people who do that much work. I know you guys look at everything, and that's really good to look at. Feels really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by board members? All right, thank you, Caleb.
Thank you very much.
Right, we are moving into item 13, which is the school perception survey results summary. We're going to turn it over to Sarah.
Hi there. I think I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do tonight is take you through the 2020-2021. I might have put an extra 20 in there. School perception survey summary. If you'll remember, we did 3 of them. So we did a staff survey, a parent survey, and then a student survey. The student survey was new last year. That was the first time that we had kind of added that to our perception questions. School climate surveys began in 2014. In 2016, we adopted a standard set of questions. So for those of you who have been through these a couple of times, we'll be able to look back and compare kind of where we were to where we are. Typically, we do these in in April. This last year, we did them the first week of May. We know that when we survey does matter, so we try to be as consistent as possible with that so that we don't get skewed results. So let's start with the staff survey. I want to take you through some of those key insights that I see when looking at the data. The first thing I want to take you back to is that comparison district. So we use school perceptions. One of the benefits of using school perceptions is that they're able to provide us the same data set for the questions that we ask our staff, our parents, and our students to similar districts. So we're able to kind of compare so that we're not just looking at our own data over time, but also kind of other folks' data over time. We see significant, I'm going to say concern within our support staff. So we know that staff were struggling last year. We saw this most pronounced among support staff, which I don't think is unfortunately a surprise. Another thing that really jumped out was our planning and improvement process. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we saw some positive results for our equipment, availability of resources, and technology. So who took the survey? We had a total of 699 staff members participate. Participation is obviously voluntary. That puts us at about 50%, which is up from previous years, and I believe the highest participation rate that we have seen since we began to survey. 43% of those who participated identified as classroom teachers, 20% as an ed specialist, which would be like a counselor, special education, library media specialist. 15% were educational assistants, and then other support staff would be like food service, transportation, custodial maintenance, represented 13% of our respondents. 5% identified as other, and then 4% identified as administration. When we look at where they're working, about 38% identified their primary location was at a secondary building, 46% is an elementary building, 10% in support services, and then 6% in other locations, which could be a 4K community site, Boston School Forest, juvenile detention center, kind of some of those smaller locations. We like to lump those together so we don't kind of, we still want people to be able to feel anonymous when they're taking the survey. I do want to note the largest percentage of like a school block came from SPASH. They represented 18% of total respondents, and 43% have been with the district for 10 or more years. In 2020, we added kind of an impact of COVID question set for both our staff and our parents. We also did the same for students last year. We wanted to know kind of overall, how are they dealing with challenges? So when we look at this, right, we've got 69% that they were doing good or great, 31% said they were really doing fair or poor. And then I tried to break out kind of those percentages into quartiles. So 81% would be, that 75% and above felt they had the tools and resources needed to do their jobs in environments that were changing very quickly and often. 74% felt they had been able to manage their stress. We're going to put that, in that below 75%, but above 50%. And then the same for being able to maintain work-life balance during the pandemic. We asked for staff to kind of rank priorities. What we had seen previously the last couple of years had been a trend to prioritize adding additional counseling, psychologists and social work services. Last year we saw kind of that provide additional intervention support services for struggling students jump above that, which does not surprise me, but is certainly worth noting. As we're going through the results at this level, I'm really looking at patterns and trends. So school perceptions uses kind of 13 different, they call them indexes, to build into kind of an index score so that we're not going through individual questions, but we're going through themes of questions. And really for staff, that comes down to people, place, and process. So if we dig into that a little bit, when we look at our comparison districts, so this is, again, us compared to districts of similar size, similar makeup, we really saw that when we looked at people, so control over work environment, you know, are you managing your health, stress management, wellness? What's your workload like, and how do you feel about, you know, your job, your affirmation piece? We really saw affirmation stand out as it took a significant drop compared to other districts, and as you'll see in a moment, compared to kind of where we had been. This was most pronounced for classroom teachers, educational assistants, and especially for our support staff. This next slide shows us, this is just our data. So again, these are those 4 indexes that make up that people theme. And as you'll see, affirmation is in the red. So you can see it kind of stays steady from 2016 to 19. It takes a little jump in 2020, and then it really falls last year for 2021. Staff engagement, looking at that second P, that place. So how do we feel about like kind of coming to work, right? So do we feel equipped? Do we have tools and training that we need? How do we feel? Do we have the support of our coworkers? Are we able to have healthy working relationships? You know, do we have high expectations and pride in our work? Trust in building leadership obviously is a big one as well. We saw these compared to our similar districts, we ranked quite high in equipped. So folks felt that they had the tools necessary to do their work. As I look through the comments, I really think that was a big kudos to technology for making sure folks had what they, you know, physically needed to do that work. And then we do see, again, educational assistants and support staff. We saw a big difference. So classroom teachers, educational specialists felt okay about all of these things. Educational assistants, support staff did not. Again, we saw those really fall. And when we take a look, again, this is just our data, and I'll give you obviously copies of this deck as well. We see, you know, nice trends upward up until 2020, and then we see some drops for 2021. When I look at comments and themes, or themes, I guess, I found within the comments, what I really saw was frustration over the rate and speed of change. We had a lot of changes last year that, you know, were very difficult for folks, I think, to adapt to. They felt that they, you know, would get comfortable kind of with where they were, and then something would change again. So that does not surprise me. There also came through a theme of wanting opportunities to provide feedback that was valued. So they felt that there were at times, you know, questions would be asked about how, you know, what should we do next, or what, you know, what do you think, how do you think it's going? But that feedback was not taken into consideration when making decisions. Obviously, COVID protocols and learning models were there. You know, we'd read one that, you know, is, hey, you're doing a great job, and then the next one would be, you know, they were really frustrated. So, and that's been a theme for, I would say, at least 18 months. Acknowledgement and thanks to staff and each other. Providing resources for struggling students came through in themes as well. And then compensation was certainly mentioned in there, partially, I think, to what Director Rakonovich presented to you tonight. And then also, we continue to see questions about post-retirement benefits in those themes as well. Overall, how satisfied are folks with the district? Overall, 58% of staff would give the district an A or B, 27% C, you know, and surely you can see the 12 and the 3 there. To me, I think when we look at this, obviously these have fallen from where we were. You know, I think it would be interesting to take a look at those Ds and those Fs and see kind of what specifically those themes are there, and if there are strategies and tactics that could be used to address that directly. Meg, do you want to stop for questions in between each survey? Do you want me to just keep going?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea, Sarah. Why don't we see if...
A lot to unpack there.
Right. So I guess I'd open this up if board members have any questions about what's been presented related to the staff survey up to now. And as Sarah noted, she'll be providing everyone with her full deck, and of course, board members have all the opportunities to go through them at length and then reach out to Craig, Corey, to, if they have further questions, if you don't have them this evening, since this is information being presented to you for the first time this year.
Okay, we'll keep moving on then, into the parent survey. So when we look at who responded to this, we had 58% of parents that responded had secondary students, 60% had elementary students, and 3% had full-time online learning students. Those numbers do not equal 100%. If you are adding along at home, folks may have had students in 2 or more of those, which kind of throws that number off a little bit. 72% indicated that their students had attended in person for the duration of the school year. 24% did the e-learning portion first semester and then joined us in person. And 13% were e-learning and or online learning center for the duration of the year. So those folks did not join us in person. 2 things I wanted to pull out. 92% felt that their family, they felt safe having their children at school. I felt that was very positive given we're in the middle of a pandemic, where I think that was certainly one of our targets for the year, was making sure that families felt that they were safe to send their students to school. Concerning to me was 58% responded that their children had not been able to continue their friendships and connections to other kids during the pandemic. Again, this is not a surprise, but something that I was certainly concerned about when going through that data. Key insights into the parent engagement. These are questions that we ask every year of parents. So we've been able to see, these are good marks, right? 91%, 80%, 87%, 81%, and 81%. That's high, that's what we want to see. However, if we look at it is compared to how we've scored in the past, that first one, the district forms effective partnership, stayed the same. So that did not change from 91%. However, the rest of them did fall in percentage. So, I think it would be deceptive to say, hey, we got this great score of, in the 80s and 90s. They dropped, and it was anywhere from a 2% to an 8% drop, depending on the question. So certainly something that will need attention as we kind of go back into, hopefully, new normal. So looking at patterns and trends specific to the parent survey, similar to the staff indexes that we saw before, there are 6 indexes that the survey looks at for parent engagement specifically. And again, those key questions feed into that index, and then the score for that index is the average of those responses for the key questions. So let's take a look. When we look just at our scores, so not the comparison districts, when parents are answering those questions of, academic expectations, rigor, high standards, relevance of material, this is the trend that we saw before, I think, in that staff survey. So we see slight ticks up, and then we see a drop for 2021. When we look at the questions of, effective instructional techniques, individual attention to students, use of homework, a collaborative nature, having great teachers, again, we see that trend up slightly, and then a drop again in 2021. Safe and healthy schools. So, do we have safe, supportive, healthy learning environments? Our bullying questions certainly build into this index. Is there an appropriate balance between school stress and life balance? How are our facilities, and then what does diversity look like in schools? We see this stay, I'm going to say the same, 4.36 to 4.34. And this was, when we do look at our comparison data, safe and healthy schools scores above other comparison districts. Leadership, do we have a clear vision and mission, effective communication, good planning, are we well organized in our presentation? We see that again, up, and then a drop again in 2021. Sense of community mirrors, again, that same trend. Do we see pride, unity, opportunities for families to provide input and feedback and family involvement? I'm hoping that as we are able to bring folks back into our schools and to have some more of those typical kind of events and relationship building and collaboration that we are used to, that we will be able to bring this back up. And then equity. So are families and students treated with respect? Are all values and beliefs accepted? Do we have the needed resources provided to all students? And our experiences and opportunities to grow provided to all students. And this one did drop a little bit back to where we were in 2016. But I will say, just like we saw with healthy and safe schools, equity was one where we scored above our comparison districts as well. Themes we saw in those comments, opportunities for valued feedback and communication. So just like we saw with our staff, our families provided much of that same feedback. Thanks and appreciation for staff. This came through very strongly. Folks saw what staff did for students last year. I believe they are continuing to see what staff are doing for students this year, and it was appreciated, and it did come through in that survey. And then COVID protocols and learning models, again, frustration, right? Changes, it was difficult. People agree with the COVID protocols, people do not agree with the COVID protocols. Again, that was one where you could kind of find, for a comment where someone's very angry about a mitigation strategy, you've got another person that really is in favor of that mitigation strategy. Overall, how satisfied were families with the district? So again, we're at 81%, very satisfied or satisfied. However, that very satisfied 2 years ago, almost at 30%. So that is a drop over the last 2 years, and what we've really seen is that has just shifted down. So 2 years ago, we saw satisfied was still at 61%, but where we've really seen that movement is into that not satisfied and very unsatisfied. So again, very similar to what I would do with the staff survey, is kind of sort that specific to those respondents and see if there are themes there that could provide some insight into why that is occurring. Questions about the parent survey? All right, you guys are troopers. We'll keep going into the student survey. So again, this is a new survey for us. When we're looking at key insights for student engagement, I pulled a couple that again I found to be of interest. 83% of our students, this would be our 6th through 12th grade students took this. And this, again, voluntary, not required. We had a pretty good participation rate, but just wanted to qualify kind of who we are talking about there. 83% said they believed one or more adults in the school cares about their future. 53% said when they felt stressed, they knew how to cope, which is great. I'd like to see that number a lot higher. And then 55% said they felt comfortable participating in class. And then that was another one that jumped out to me that I think I would like to see higher. So who are we talking to? Not surprisingly, since it was a 6-12 survey, 69% were secondary students, 31% were elementary. When we take a peek at representative secondary schools, they were pretty even across the board, which was nice to see. 54% identified as female, 46% identified as male, 98% of the students were our resident students. When we looked at ethnicity, I did want to compare kind of what those responses were to our actual demographic data to see if those are reflective of our student makeup. White students at 82% is a little bit higher than our actual. We have about 79% students who identify as white. It was a little bit lower for our Black students at 2.2. We only had a 1% response. Hispanic students at 7% was also lower. We had about a 6% response. And for our Indigenous students, we had a 0.1% response. And when we pull our demographics, they're at a 0.3. Respondents that were on track were those identifying as Asian at 6.7. We had 7% response. Those who identified as having multiple ethnicities at 4.4, and Pacific Islander at 0.1 were all representative of a student body. When we asked students about the impact of COVID overall, how are you doing with challenges? Again, we were at 60s, so 61% responded good or great. And then thinking of those dashboards again in quartiles, right? If we're thinking of that 50 to 75%, 74% have been able to maintain a healthy school-life balance during the pandemic. 63% felt they had been able to keep up with homework, and 58% felt they had been able to manage stress. Helpful for schools, the survey really does dig into kind of plans for after high school, where students are thinking about that, kind of digging into some of that academic and career planning that's taking place. So while they'll dig into that a little bit more, I did just want to include here 78% of students who responded did respond that they were planning on some sort of post-secondary education, whether that's 4-year, 2-year, or vocational school. And 12% just weren't sure. Again, we've got a lot of younger students participating, right? I surely did not know what I wanted to do when I was in 6th grade. And then what resources helped them decide that? 76% were parents, 55% friends, and 52% was internet searching, which made me chuckle. The student engagement survey indexes look at these, I think we've got 8 of them areas. So connectedness, drive, citizenship, preparation, social emotional aptitude, wellness, academic and career planning, and equity. We know we want our students to be engaged, so when we look at these charts are a little bit different. So we pulled these right from the school perceptions reports. They felt that they did a nice job of illustrating kind of how students were responding. So it's on the left side of my screen. I hope it's on the left of yours as well. The connectedness index response items. You can see kind of how students responded there. And then on the right side of your screen by grade level, and then also by the comparison school. So our district responses are in blue. The comparison school responses are in red. And that trend line is taking place over time. When we look at drive, student has courage and resolve to see through to completion their tasks, minus setbacks, minus obstacles. They're challenging themselves. They're taking, more challenging courses, exposing themselves to a more rigorous kind of academic course load. Again, we see our responses on the left, and then our index by grade level on the right. An interesting trend we do see when we look at those graphs on the right across each of these as we go through them, here's citizenship. We do see the district average below our comparison data at each of those. Again, this is baseline data for students. We have not taken this survey before or given this survey before. And I do find it interesting. We see, kind of where they are in 5th grade. We see a slight dip, and then we see a slight lift at 12th grade for each of them. So I don't know if that's just kind of feeling more in control of their future, more autonomous, the time of year we gave the survey, but it is something that occurs at each. Here again, we can see it when we look at preparation, the student has clear goals for the future, right? I think that's good that we see that lift at 12th grade. My question would be kind of how do we get that up a little higher sooner? Social emotional aptitudes, the student has the ability to understand and manage emotions, utilizing critical resources, feeling empathy for others, demonstrating self-control, kind of some of those key markers we're looking for there. Again, here we actually see our seniors lift above the comparison data once they get to 12th grade. Wellness. We see this dip from 5th grade down and then lift again at 12th grade. Academic and career planning, so how are they thinking about their future? Are they thinking about their future? Are they looking at career paths that we are providing them, exploring careers and jobs? And then how are they finding those? Where are they finding those? So some of that data we saw before on the previous slide. And then the last one of these indexes is that equity piece again. So all students and families are treated with respect, accepted for values and beliefs, and have those opportunities to grow. So really making sure, seeing where students are. So again, we see some lifts there at 10th grade, a drop in 11th, a small bump at 12th. So I'd be curious to look and see if we could find some explanation for why that is occurring. Questions for the student survey?
I do. Taking a look at the respondent screen that you had, with all the percentages on there, I believe for the responses, do you have the percentage of white students, black students, Asian students, in comparison to the numbers that were returned?
Yep, absolutely. So when we look at our demographic data of who responded compared to what our student body actually looks like, we had higher response from our white students. So that was about, we had an 82% response of white students. Overall, when we look at our demographic data, we have about 79% white students. It was about 1.2% lower for black students. They responded at 1%. And they make up 2.2% of the total population. Hispanic students were also low by about a percentage point. They responded at 6%. They make up 7%. And our indigenous students responded at 0.1%, and they make up 0.3%. For our Asian students, our students who identify with multiple, having more than one ethnicity, and then Pacific Islander students, those were all representative when we pull that data.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any additional questions for Sarah with respect to the survey data? All right, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you. I know the amount of, I don't know the amount of time and effort that goes into.
I'm sorry, Meg.
Yep.
I think I was muted and I meant to unmute there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
So, Sarah, there's a tremendous amount of information here. Yep. This is just sharing my perspective. When you're asking for input, and what you've shared here was not available to us in the presentation.
Correct.
And then later, we're going to get all of the detailed information, I'm assuming. Okay? You're giving explanations to some of these charts, and so I'm looking at them. It's a lot of information without anything to compare it to. So for me, it would be great to either have this on a screen to look at so that when you're talking about it and you're giving us an explanation on, so here are the questions, and you're explaining what some of the things are. It's really difficult for me to connect those two together with either not having this or not having the detailed information. So if nobody, I'm not asking questions because I'm not sure what questions to ask on the information I have. It's a tremendous amount of information you're giving us, and it's extremely valuable. But I'm having a hard time giving you valid questions because there's so much there, and without having this initially, or having the details and then following up with this, it would make sense to me when you start explaining and I'm looking at the numbers. So I'm having a hard time with that.
Yeah, I apologize for that, Chris. If you have questions after receiving the deck, I would certainly be happy to sit down and go through them with you.
Well, and I will. I'm just saying from my perspective, it's hard to give you valid questions is what I'm saying. It's not that I don't have any. It's like I'm not sure what those details look like, the numbers that you're going to show us, because you're giving us percentages and you're explaining what's behind those questions. So it's just hard for me to ask you questions, is what I'm saying.
Sure. And what I'm hearing, Chris, I just want to clarify, what we'll be providing you is the report. So is just what I went through. So there is no more kind of additional information coming unless you specifically want to sit down and kind of go through that.
No, but you're going to give us the report. And so when I'm looking at the report, then what you showed us tonight makes sense, but without having either one of those before you give that presentation, it's difficult. But we can talk about it later anyway. It's great information, great questions. I'm really glad to see the percentages, that you're looking at that and what avenues you can take to make them better. So thank you. And I love the student one. Thank you.
So I do want to remind board members, this is a survey that's given out annually. It's given out clearly to our staff, it's given out to our parents. And this year, for the first time, was given out to our students. The information that is collected, I mean, this is a survey, frankly, by the administration to our various stakeholders. This data is one of the many data sets then that administration and leadership within our schools and leadership at the classroom level, leadership at the grade level have the ability to look through and move forward, again, specific to the data, because all of this can and will be broken down school by school, grade by grade, for the people who are working for us full time to be able to better support students and to better provide information, support, connection with parents, as well as now we have survey data coming in from our students to take a look at, again, over time, as to how are we doing and how can we do better. So the report it's a report that we as a board are provided with information about kind of high level. Here are what the trends we're seeing. Here are where we're seeing pressure points. But ultimately, the superintendent, administration, cabinet leadership are working with the specific data sets to make those concrete improvements that we're hoping then provide those better trends that we're looking for moving forward. This year, I'm not surprised that we saw numbers drop in light of what we have all been through for the past 18 months. That doesn't mean that we can just say, okay, it's COVID, don't worry about it. It's COVID, it's had an impact, and it's had a negative impact, and how can we, mitigate, remediate, support getting that trend back moving forward. Ultimately, that data is coming in front of us so that we're able to see, you know what, this year the numbers overall are saying that people aren't as satisfied, whether it's our staff or our parents. We don't know about our students. I guess we can make the same assumption with them. But ultimately, it's how can the people on the ground use the information they get to make improvements in the day-to-day operation of our schools and the day-to-day education of our students. The survey's anonymous, and we do that because we want to get as many people to respond as possible. The comments are all anonymous. The bottom line is, if we as a board took a look at the comments, absent some very significant redacting, we would be able, as board members, to identify very likely the school, potentially the level, the class level, potentially individuals, because we ask people for candid information so that we can get that true picture from them in this survey. So I do want to put that out to board so that you're aware of kind of, and again, this is me speaking as one board member, but ultimately this data is data that is going to be fundamentally used in strategic planning and in department planning and in school planning as we move forward with the rest of this school year and then into next year.
Well put.
So again, once you get the deck from Sarah, if there's any additional questions, if you want information, as she noted, she's happy to sit down with board members and you know, talk through this. Ultimately, a lot of this data is confidential, and we as individual board members have not had access to it, at least in the years that I've been on the board.
When do you think that will be coming to us?
I just sent it to you.
Oh, terrific.
All right, again, we wanted to bring it in front of you today. Sarah just has gotten the information compiled for this year, and take a look at it, and if you have further follow-up, you know, feel free to follow up with Craig, Corey, Sarah with respect to it. All right, so future meetings, dates, and times. We do have board members. We've got our budget hearing and our board meeting on October 25th, 2021. Just a reminder that the public hearing will be at 6 o'clock, and then the regular board meeting at 6:30. And we will be informing you as we move forward as to whether we will be looking to handle that virtually or how we are going to be handling that meeting again to be in accordance and in line with our safety protocols. Our regular school board meeting for November is November 8th. So I'm now looking for a motion to go into closed session under 1985 paren 1 paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically consider administrative contract, specifically to consider superintendent contract. So could I have a motion to go into closed session?
To go into closed.
I have a motion by Ebel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Wade. Any discussion or questions? I will have Carlin call the roll.
Mr. Mansky,
Yes.
Ms. Va,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Rano.
Judy?
Yes, I have a,
Okay. Ms. Erler.
Yes.
Okay. 9-0, motion passes.
Okay, so we'll be going into closed. If everybody can sign out of this meeting and then sign back into the next one, and it'll be probably about 10 minutes.